Welcome back to Dimes on Duval. Alongside Mike Yazji, I'm Keith Manzi. Skylar Chase is not with us today, but we have a very, very special episode for you. And why is that, Mike?
We just finished an interview with Nate Monroe, columnist for Jax.com, and we just want to talk to him a little bit about the whole Lot J issue that we had in Jacksonville last week and what happened with the whole deal.
Issue is an understatement. That was a debacle, and Nate is very well informed with what is going on. If you don't already follow him on Twitter, you definitely should. He's at Nate Monroe, the letter T, the letter U. That's for Times Union if you didn't know. Give him a follow, and we're not going to leave you hanging any longer. We're going to jump right into this interview. If you want to stick around afterwards, we do have a little bit more to talk about after the interview, but let's take it away. Joining Mike Yazji and myself, Keith Manzi, for a special interview, one of our rare interviews, actually, Mike. It's nice to have someone aboard. We have, from the Times Union, Nate Monroe. Nate Monroe, how are you, bro? I don't know. I tried to make a rhyme. It didn't work.
I'm great, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We felt like we had to reach out to someone who probably knows a little bit more about Lot J than ourselves, and who other than the guy who, I don't know, did you live tweet the entire thing? I think you did.
Yeah, that's probably a safe assumption. I did that a few times, but, yeah.
Well, we wanted to start off a little bit light with you first. So for those of you that do not know, yes, you can find Nate Monroe on Jax.com. He's a Florida Times Union Metro columnist. And in his Twitter bio, he says he is son of a Cajun and LSU. So, assuming that you graduated from LSU then?
I did.
And you're still a fan, I assume? I
am. Maybe not so much this year. I kind of dipped out a little bit.
But, I mean, you were a fan when they beat Florida, right?
Of course. I'm a fan when they win. No, I am like the worst kind of fan. But, no, yeah, I was so we won a national championship when I was in school, and from that point on, my fandom has kind of been moderated pretty significantly. Like I sort of feel like, I got to see him win, so I got it out of my system. So I'm just much more casual than I used to be.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, do you have all of your sports allegiances for the Louisiana area, or do you kind of just switch around?
No, I mean, it's LSU and the Saints. Those are definitely my two teams. I do root for the Jaguars, despite what some people seem to think that I want to drive out of town.
Yeah. I thought you were so anti-Jaguars. What's going on?
Yeah. No, I do root for them, but they're also a team that, I mean, it is kind of fun to watch them implode sometimes too. Like I feel a little bit spoiled because I've just got a little bit of enough of a remove from the team where I don't get, too wrapped up and I don't get too pissed off or anything. So it's a nice feeling, but 2017 was fun, man. Like the city, I mean, when the Jaguars do well, like this is like palpably a better place to live. Like I totally buy into that, and I don't need to be convinced of that at all.
I feel like, this should be telling some of your Twitter followers that, Nate is a fan.
I am.
We appreciate that.
I even have I probably have a few more Jaguar shirts and Saints shirts these days.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, here's a Saints question. Do you think Drew Brees took his last snap?
Yeah, I think so. It's probably for the best. I mean, he did not look great Sunday, and I mean, this has been much remarked upon, and my sports takes definitely don't need to be super public because I'm not I'm definitely not the expert, but I mean anything beyond a mid-range pass, he just doesn't have anymore. His arm is just not really there. So it's been a hell of a run, and definitely sad to see him go, but it's time.
Yeah, I mean, watching that game the other day against the Bucs it was hard to watch. I mean, a few times he dropped back and he didn't even look comfortable dropping back. And, at that point, it's like, man, might be time to hang it up. And that first interception that he threw was just horrendous. So I would agree with you. I think he took his last snap, Mike. Do you think so, too?
Yeah, there were some points in the game on Sunday where I was like, what are you doing, Drew? Like, there were some bad throws. He did not look good, and I agree. I think his last snap was played on Sunday.
Yeah, he looked like shit. I mean, that was
Yeah, best way to put it right there. Well, basically, we are Jags fans. We are, Mike and I at least, are Florida State fans. So Mike was fortunate to be at Florida State during a national championship as well. So you guys have that in common, which is a pretty special feeling.
Oh, yeah.
You know, generally 4 years at a university, being able to experience something like that is monumental. But here in Jacksonville, we don't really get to experience that a lot. And the Jaguars, they like to lose. JU and UNF aren't of that caliber to be really counted on that. If you really want to get into it, you can go with the Jumbo Shrimp or the Suns when they were winning all of theirs. The Icemen have not impressed so far this year, and I could go on and on with all the little small teams, but we're going to stick with the Jags here. So the Jaguars and Lot J. Mike, I know you have some very good questions about Lot J, and I might have some things to add to. So, Mike, what do you got first, right off the bat?
So, honestly, Nate, I know you are definitely pretty well versed in the whole Lot J issue. You were following it throughout since the beginning. And I just want to know, like, what, in your opinion, killed the deal for Lot J? Was it the so-called bread box loan that was in the deal? And if you want to elaborate on the bread box deal for some that are not informed about it,
Me.
Okay, Keith, for example, was that the main reason for the deal to fall through, or what was it in your opinion?
So, I mean, I think, as is often the case in government and politics, I mean, there were a number of reasons it failed. Certainly, I think the primary reason is just that it was a crummy deal for the city. It was just too expensive for what it was going to be, which, despite the impression some people have about Lot J, it was going to be a pretty small development. It was not going to be a transformational, once-in-a-generation project. It was going to be an incremental benefit for the sports district, which would have been a good thing, but not such a good thing that the city needed to spend $240, and if you count in the interest payments from the debt, maybe closer to $400 million for it. So I think the project was not grand enough. I think the terms of the deal, like you're alluding to with the bread box loan, there were some. The deal itself was a little bit opaque. Like, it was not a super transparent deal. It wasn't really clear what Shad Khan and his business partner, the Cordish companies, were actually going to spend. And I think that was a problem. And there were just some politics around the deal. I mean, look, the mayor went on a couple of sports radio shows the next day to blame vendettas against him for the reason it died. And there actually is a little bit of truth to that. I guess what he would leave out is that, vendettas go both ways. The mayor did not do a very good job building support for the project. And the council punished him for that. And definitely a few members arguably voted against it just to fuck with him. And, that's politics. So I think those are the primary reasons. And I could probably talk all day about each one of those, but I'll kind of stick to whatever it is you guys are interested in.
No, you're totally fine. But I did want to jump back there when you were talking about them jumping on sports radio. You're talking to two guys that are very, very anti local sports radio because of just the
lack of knowledge, I feel like, on sports radio.
Lack of knowledge and just incredible biasness sometimes. It's just it gets a little sickening, but we'll move on then before I get too heated about that.
Yeah. Well, there's just a very I think 1010XL gets tagged with this sometimes, and I think it seems like they go out of their way to earn it. That there's just like this weird homerism vibe. I know that they're the official station of the Jaguars, but listening to them, you just get the sense sometimes, like, dude, you can criticize them, like, it's okay.
Well, just listen to the Frangie show and you'll hear nothing but that. Frank will never say a bad word about the franchise ever.
but he'll say if he even tries to, it comes out as a, well, I don't know. It's like, no, just say it, man. Like, the franchise sucks. This sucks. Tony Boselli should be in the Hall of Fame. This, and this, and this, and this. He doesn't say it, and it just makes me even more mad. And I still listen sometimes just so I can get mad, and then I turn it off. I'm like, why did I do this to myself?
Yeah. No, I have not, especially since I've been working from home during the pandemic, and so I haven't really listened to it since really last week. It was the first time in a long time. Sometimes I'd pop it on the radio just to hear, what the outrage of the day is with Prosser, but I don't do that anymore.
Good thing he's Twitterless, Jeff, because he would have a mentions full of just trash.
Just ratioed all the time.
So now you mentioned about how the deal was not transparent, and I even noticed in one of your articles you said Councilman Garrett Dennis said, let's face it, the people don't want this deal. The people don't want Lenny Curry's poorly negotiated deal. What was the key, or what was the main part that was poorly negotiated? Was it the fact that there was like I said, the bread box loan with no interest for Shad Khan, or the amount of money that you stated over near $400 million if you count interest towards the taxpayers? What do you think was the poorly negotiated aspect of it for Lenny Curry and the Jaguars side?
So I feel like there are a few things that you would need to touch on. I mean, the 20,000 foot view is it was a bad deal because the city agreed to be a 50-50 partner on the cost and not even remotely a 50-50 beneficiary of the revenue. The city was never going to make its money back on this project. And through like a number of different ways. I mean, there were benefits that Shad Khan was going to get out of this that no one even really got around to talking about. I mean, we were just going to give him $12 million worth of land, like just real estate, the development pads, for free. And, that's like a huge benefit in a normal development deal between the city and a developer. I mean, the donation of free land would be a major consideration. That would be a huge benefit. And this deal was so one-sided that like no one even really talked about that. So just from a broad view, I mean, again, it was just too expensive. I mean, it was too expensive by magnitudes. The breadbox loan had become, I think, a bit of a symbol of how bad the deal was. So the breadbox loan, it probably is not super helpful to refer to it as a loan because people get a certain idea in their head. Understandably, when you talk about a loan, the general thinking is that somebody is going to get an amount of money and pay it back over time with interest.
Right.
This wasn't going to operate like that at all. It was essentially a tax loophole that would have allowed Shad Khan to get about $52 million in straight cash and not have to pay any taxes on it. The city was going to loan him $65 million. And from the 65, Shad Khan was going to take out roughly $13 million to pay the city back with. Like there was this sort of complicated setup where the $13 million would go into a trust account and the trust account would grow over time. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like Shad was just kind of getting a cool, like $52 million. And the bizarre part of it beyond just like literally giving a developer that much money in cash, I think first of all, the fact that initially the city and the Jaguars did talk about it as if it was more or less a standard loan pissed people off. Like we came to find out over time that wasn't true. And it actually was this more complicated setup and there is no paying the city back. So, I mean, I think that made people angry and I think that eroded some trust in the deal. And also like the Jaguars never justified why they needed this money. You know, Shad Khan has access to almost no cost credit on his own. I mean, being one of the richest men in America means that banks are very eager to loan money to you. And I mean, he could get a $65 million loan for almost no interest without the city's involvement. And so there was confusion about why the city would be lending him credit in the first place. I mean, one of the reasons that you would think it would be beneficial to partner with a billionaire is specifically because they have access to things like no cost credit. So it just didn't make sense. And again, like the Jaguars were not forthcoming with any sort of financial documentation to demonstrate that they needed that money. It was just kind of a trust us, we need this to make the deal work. And, oh, if you take this one element out, we're going to walk away. You know, even without the breadbox loan, if you could zero that out entirely, we're still talking about a development deal that had about $180 million in incentives. That still would have been the largest development package the city had ever given a developer. It still would have been the most generous and the most one-sided. And most of that $180 million still would have been mostly cash. So, I mean, that's what he walked away from. And I think I think that, like, to me, I think there was a bit of entitlement and greed on the part of the Jaguars. And I think that really turned off a few council members.
Yeah, and that's one thing, like, from the outside point of view, when I saw that there was like a multi-million-dollar for like $65 million loan with no interest, that was something I was skeptical about. So I want to dig more into it. And that's why I reached out to you so we can get more information about the whole deal and what happened, because I know a lot of people that I know were split on it, because I tweeted a poll last week about do you want Lot J to happen, or do you want Lot J to pass? And an overwhelming majority did vote yes, but I feel like that's because they did not know the details of the actual loan. And when I saw the interest-free loan, I was like, okay, that's kind of one thing I'm very skeptical about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that there is and when we talk about, public opinion surveys too, there's always, if you take a survey of Jaguars fans, I would imagine that people are far more likely to be okay with a deal like this. And when you talk to more like the general public, typically subsidies for sports teams are politically toxic. They are not, they do not poll well. UNF did a survey on Lot J, and I think it was like 56 or 58% of the respondents in the poll were against Lot J and against future funding for sports stadiums. I mean, there is typically not usually a lot of support for this kind of thing. And it's easy to see why, right? Like, people get mad about giving a billionaire a bunch of money. I think there are good reasons that public assistance is needed. I think, like, I wouldn't be against any public subsidies for something like Lot J, but this particular deal, without a doubt, was excessive. And I think that some of the outrage on sports radio and on Twitter and among some of the fans does reflect the fact that, the city and the Jaguars messaging, I think, was a little bit deceptive at times. I think that people didn't have a good grasp on how much it was going to cost and what the project was going to look like.
Yeah, and I think a big thing that me and quite a few other friends of mine that you tweeted out, if Shad Khan really cared about it that much, why didn't he show up?
Right. And that's always, that element especially, and I would actually be interested to hear what you guys think. They wanted it both ways. They want, as always, to sort of tell the fan base that they're committed to Jacksonville, but they're also happy to leverage this kind of unspoken threat that they'll walk away if we don't give them everything they want. And, I think that's duplicitous too. For the record, I don't think that this is something Shad Khan would walk away over. I think if he is willing to walk over Lot J, I think that his commitment to the city is already pretty flimsy, and I don't think we can change that with one development deal. But I would be interested in what you guys think about that. Like, what do you guys think Shad Khan's long-term intentions are?
Honestly, I can see where he's coming from with like the entertainment district that he was trying to advertise. But I think the most important thing, him and Mark Lamping were preaching viability for Jacksonville. They need to they need to get fans involved, blah, blah, blah. Honestly, the number one thing for me is win some damn football games. Because back in 2017, we went to the AFC Championship game. And the following year, I was one of many people who bought season tickets the following year, 2018. I even said to myself, pre-2017, they need to prove me wrong. I'm tired of the losing. I was going to get season tickets. I waited. In 2018, after AFC Championship, I'm like, okay, it looks like it's building something. And then 2018 happened, and it was a disastrous season, and I didn't get season tickets again. I think the only way to – one key start for Shad Khan and Lamping and the whole Jaguars organization, if they want to keep the team, they've got to build a better team. Fans want winning football. It's frustrating that I've known the Jaguars my entire life, and I've only seen, granted not when I was a kid, I don't count when I was an infant, but really 3 playoff seasons, and that was 05, 07, and 2017. So it's frustrating for me, and I think he wants to keep the team in Jacksonville, but the lack of fan support there's a reason behind it, is because they're not winning games.
I think if he wanted to leave Jacksonville, we would have left Jacksonville by now. I firmly believe that Shad doesn't really want to move to, say London, like everyone always says. If that was the case, we would have been in London by now. It would have been terrible. Gosh, that would have been so bad. But we try not to think about that. I mean, I'm not going to – well, okay, I can't say that. But, due to COVID, we didn't have London games, and I think that really showed them that, like, hey, yeah, this team needs to be here and it should stay here. So I'm hoping Shad is here long term. I hope he makes right decisions. And I guess we'll just have to see what goes down with Lot J. Do you think there is a future for Lot J now? Is it done? Can we move forward from this? I want to say, was it Mark Lamping that said Lot J is gone now? Like, there's no way. There's got to be something, right?
That's a really good question. As you just said, Lamping did immediately indicate after the vote that they were done with Lot J. I kind of doubt that at least in the long run. I mean, again, if that's true, they're walking away from what still would have been the largest, most generous incentive package the city has ever given a developer. Something that I also think people should consider, and this is just more speculation on my part, but so Shad Khan had a business partner on this deal called Cordish Companies, and Cordish is a nationally known developer. They're well connected. One of the Cordish family members worked in the Trump administration for a time. They specialize in building these mixed-use developments next to sports stadiums and arenas. This is kind of their thing. And I have a theory that Cordish might have been the party really driving the hard bargain in all of this. They, in my judgment, just looking at some of the deals that they cut in other cities, I think they can be a bit predatory about taxpayer incentives. And I wonder if it was that company that was really driving the hard bargain. I'm not totally sure on that. And so if that's true, and Cordish is the one saying, hey, we're not doing this unless we get kind of this outrageous deal, then maybe they are done. I can't, I speculate that it's got to be something like that because, again, they could have a deal if they wanted one. They could have a deal tomorrow. The council, they know exactly what they would need to get the majority necessary to pass that deal. So I don't know the answer. I like I said, I think maybe in the long run we might see some version of it come back.
Interesting. Cordish, they were the ones that are on board with the shipyards.
They would not be involved in the shipyards. That would be a straight Shad Khan development. And, I have a rant about that too. Lamping sort of wanted to turn the page immediately after the Lot J vote and said they're going to be focused on the shipyards. First, when they talk about the shipyards, they're really talking about Metropolitan Park. The shipyards, the piece of property that is actually called the shipyards is further west on Bay Street. It's where people park on game days and tailgate. They have just decided to call the entire area the shipyards. They're talking about Metropolitan Park, which is more or less right across the street from the stadium. And Shad has this grand plan to build a Four Seasons and a medical facility and, maybe a few other things. That deal is contingent upon the National Park Service giving a green light for the city to build on Metropolitan Park. So Metropolitan Park was built with a grant from the National Park Service. And in exchange for getting the money to build that park years and years ago, the city promised that would exist as a public park in perpetuity. So to undo that covenant, the Park Service has to agree to it. The city and the Jaguars have been working on that for years now, and they have not been successful in convincing the Park Service to release them from that obligation. And so when Lamping talks about the shipyards, like as if it's this thing that's happening, it's not. It's in limbo right now. And I mean, the Park Service was not super receptive to this idea during the Trump administration. I cannot imagine, and I haven't talked to anyone with any knowledge of this deal who does think that the Biden administration is going to be any more receptive to that. So that project is also kind of in a weird state of limbo. And I don't know why Lamping doesn't acknowledge that. I mean, he makes it sound as if they're ready to start negotiating that now. I mean, I guess they could negotiate something with the city completely in theory, but they can't build anything on Metropolitan Park right now.
Yeah. And we'll just keep waiting on that, I'm sure, for several more years.
Yes. Well, and, that's another thing about Lot J I don't think people really internalized. The construction timeline for Lot J, what was presented to the city anyway, showed that it would have taken them like 7 years to build that. And that would have been according to them, on the fastest possible timeline. So, I mean, even if Lot J had passed last week, we're talking about something that wasn't going to be open and operational for several years down the road.
Yeah, not only that, it would have been an eyesore for anyone coming to Jacksonville, for example, watch the game or whatnot, and just driving through the area, I'm sure. Now, one thing, though, now I want to bring up is you mentioned the shipyards and obviously Lot J. Metropolitan Park area. My thing is, do you think the Cons and the Jaguars and Lamping are thinking that we need one of those entertainment districts to help keep the team here in Jacksonville? Because I feel like, obviously, with a winning football team, that'll help. But do you think we absolutely need that entertainment district downtown where the Jaguars Stadium is currently?
Well, I guess it depends. By every financial metric, the Jaguars are a successful and profitable organization. Shad Khan has an internal goal of boosting local revenue for the football team. So, like, you guys probably know this, but I mean, the NFL, all of the teams split their television revenue, and the local revenue is kind of on them to generate. And this has been an increasing trend in the NFL that owners are starting to get a little bit more creative with how to generate more money. And these developments are one way. Now, keep in mind, the city just helped Shad Khan build a new amphitheater connected to the stadium. And Shad Khan has a spin-off company that makes a considerable amount of money booking concerts at that venue. It has also been used as a de facto headquarters for AEW Wrestling, which Shad's son Tony started. So, I mean,
Oh, don't get me started on Tony Khan and the lack of
Yeah, I
involvement
mean,
with the
sure,
Jaguars.
and that's totally like he seems all consumed with AEW. So, I mean, do they need Lot J to stay here? No. They need Lot J to grow their share of revenue, their share of local revenue. But, I mean, they're not hurting by any standard definition of that term. As is often noted, Shad Khan bought the team for about $760 million, and the team's valuation is somewhere in the $2.45 billion today. I mean, that's just orders of magnitude of growth. So, so the answer is no. He doesn't need it. But it's also fair to expect him to want to find new revenue opportunities. And again, like, I think that's fine. And I think the city can partner with him if the partnership is reasonable. I don't think anyone doesn't think Lot J isn't a fine idea. The dispute is, how much do taxpayers really need to put into this thing? I mean, at the end of the day, that's really the sticking point.
Makes sense. And maybe someone can negotiate it with the Jaguars a better deal in 2023 once there's a new election for mayor. So we can definitely see, because obviously Lenny Curry's time will end in 2023.
Yes.
So one last question for me. So just to recap Lot J, why was it originally, because I saw on David Bauerlein's tweet, also for the Florida Times-Union reporter, he voted that the city council voted 15-4 to advance Lot J legislation. But why did they deny it from the original point of view? Like, why do they want to push it more and then deny it last week?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting you asked that, because I've seen a lot of people actually with questions about that. So the way that legislation at the city council level typically works, the process is that legislation goes through a committee hearing. Because Lot J was a big piece of legislation, an important piece of legislation, the council heard it as what's called a committee of the whole. So most of the council committees only have about 4 or 5 members on them. Committee of the whole means that the entire council agreed to hear it. And a committee meeting is intended to be a place for more like freewheeling discussion on legislation. Because council meetings, as I think a lot of people experienced last week, they take forever. Committee meetings are supposed to help kind of make sure that there is discussion outside of a formal meeting, so that those formal meetings can, happen a little bit more efficiently. They also give the public more opportunities to address the council. So the committee of the whole voted to advance the legislation to the full council on a 15-4 vote. And then the legislation at the full meeting failed because it needed a supermajority. So it needed 13 votes and it only got 12. So a couple of council members turned. Honestly, it's not unusual for council members to vote something out of committee and then vote against it in the full council meeting. So voting for something in a committee meeting, sometimes what that council member is saying is, I've still got questions. If I don't have them answered between now and our final meeting on this, then I'm going to vote against it, but I will advance it today. Like, I will let it get to a final vote, but I'm not necessarily a yes vote in the end. That is not unusual, but I can see why it looked weird to people.
Yeah, at least because I know a lot of people reached out. They're like, because I saw so many people reply back to the original tweet saying, that means it's great news, let's go. Granted, it is a big news to get to the final vote, but the fact that 3 people changed, that's what looked odd to me without obviously knowing the backstory of.
Yeah, and I will say, vote. I mean, usually when somebody votes for something in a committee meeting, it's a good indication that they'll vote for it, the second time. But it's just it does happen where votes change between the committee and the final meeting. Again, it's more a procedural thing where they're saying, fine, like, let's just get it up for a final vote. So yeah, that part of it was not quite as strange to me, but I can see why that raised some eyebrows.
Yeah, I'm really glad you explained that, because now once you say it, I'm like, oh, well, that makes complete sense. Because, anybody, if you had questions about something, you'd want to learn more before you give a definitive answer, and to push it forward without really, impacting in a severe way, more of just, media,
Right.
construing it a certain way is a good idea. So
Yeah.
I understand that. I think that's all we have. We appreciate you coming on, Nate. I mean, honestly, we reached out. We kind of were just hoping for just at least an answer or a polite decline, and you said yes. And we greatly appreciate anybody that can come on Dimes on Duval.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad you guys asked. Anytime.
Thanks. And if you don't already follow him on Twitter, he is at Nate Monroe TU. That's the letter T and the letter U. And you can check out his latest article on Jacksonville.com about the 2023 Jacksonville mayoral race, which Mike alluded to a little bit earlier. And you can read more about Lot J under him as well. So thank you for joining us, Nate. We appreciate you. And
Mike, Keith, thanks.
Soon.
This is great.
Awesome.
Once again, thanks to Nate Monroe for that wonderful interview. Again, if you don't follow him on Twitter, do so. If you don't read his columns, go to jacksonville.com/news/Nate Monroe, or just find his name under the search column and check out everything he writes. I don't think he's written a bad thing yet. And thanks to, oh man, you know what I forgot, Mike?
What?
I forgot to give a shout out to my mom.
Why?
She asked me for one when I told her about this interview. She asked me to say hello and how she's such a big fan, because she is. She's the one who got me into reading his column. She would send them to me on Twitter, and I forgot to say thanks.
Well,
you know what that means, though.
What does that mean?
We'll just have to have him on again.
That's true.
Sorry, Mom, if you're listening. I promise you I'll say hello next time. Hey, maybe I'll get you to write a few questions for me, and we can ask him there. But, Mike, I wanted to switch over real quick.
Maybe he can send in a piece of autographed newspaper to her.
Hey, there we go. And we can send him some Dimes on Duval swag.
That's true.
I got the shirt now. We gotta get some more of those in production.
Speaking of which, prize pack. We'll figure out a way to get someone the prize pack for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, we got to figure out something there, because y'all sucked with your guessing, man. I mean, not gonna lie, so did we, but those were some brutal guesses. Somebody said like 56-3 at one point.
Someone said, man. Oh, that was you who said 6-3 or whatever for the Bears Jaguars game.
I think I said 3-0 or something like that.
Close to it.
Yeah, but switching actually to the Jaguars. So, as everyone knows by now, Urban Meyer has been officially named the head coach. Mike, this is just all opinionated. You don't have to go into facts if you don't want to. You can if you want, but how do you feel, man? How do you feel about it?
So originally, I was very skeptical. I was one of someone who thought it, undecided, want to see what happens. But honestly, after just a week of it, I'm like, it cannot get much worse than what the hell we've had the last decade.
You're right.
We went 1-15. The only way we get worse is if we go 0-16. And honestly, I don't know about you, Keith, but I don't think we're going 0-16 next year with Trevor Lawrence potentially a quarterback.
I don't think so either, no. But I have to say I was skeptical, and I still am skeptical. My goodness, I can't even say that word. I still look at him as Urban Crier.
That's fair.
I never liked the guy when he was at Florida. I never liked him at Ohio State. I didn't like him on TV either. I thought he was kind of a weenie, but he's going to have to prove it to me. And I think there's a lot of fans that might share my sentiment. If not, hey, you know what?
And it's
And
it's not, sorry to cut you off, but it's not just local fans. It's people across the national media. They're very interested to see what happens with Urban as the head coach of the Jaguars. And honestly, I am really excited to see what he can bring, because he's not going to be the play caller. He never was. He always built the team based on the needs of the team. He always helped players get to their best potential. So I expect him to hire some coaches to help develop this team and help them win.
I hope so. I mean, I really do. He says nothing but the best that we're going to bring in. He's going to have to prove that to me, and I think he's going to have to prove that to this team. I don't want to sit here and hire a bunch of scrubs that are just like, you know what? I don't even think this guy should even be coaching at all. He's just a loser. But you know what? Again, we'll have to wait and see. I'm kind of like you in the fact where I'm just like hoping for the best, but I've kind of been more on the side. I don't know, on the history of this podcast, I've been glass half empty kind of guy. Skyler's always been the glass is full no matter what. I mean,
yeah, I don't know how we can keep.
Well, remember 2017 we did the pick'em, or we did the season preview, and we picked our record, and he said 10-6.
And we were 10-6.
And you said 7-9, and I said 6-10.
Yeah, well,
I'm always the one on the bottom because it's hard for me to be trustworthy. And I can sometimes see the light because Skyler will sometimes sway me in that direction, and then you'll be the negative Nancy, which we need. I mean, I like that, but
which I've been right 90% of the last decade.
Oh yeah, you've been right. Yeah, you've been right. It's just, for the sake of argument, and it's just kind of fun just sitting there watching, just like. I'm sorry, bad radio, but Mike just clicked on a picture of fat James Harden and skinny James Harden. James Harden, you lost 50 pounds in 3 days. If you don't release a diet book, you are leaving money on the table, Bubba.
And that was by the Iron Sheik. But no, for Urban Meyer, I just don't see. We can't get worse than 1-15. I don't see us going 0-16.
No, me neither. I'm not saying we're going to, but are we going to be better than? Next year, if we go 6-10, is that good enough?
That's a success in my opinion.
What if we go 7-9 the next year after that? Is that okay?
Depends on how bad. Now, depends on a few things for me. Were we hurt at that 7-9? Did we barely get to 7-9 because of injuries? There's just so many factors for me.
Okay, to negate those. Negate the injury bug, which is always going to happen anyway. But if we go, let's say 5-11 next year, and we go 7-9 the year after, is that okay for you? Is that enough of an increase?
Yes.
What if we step back the year after? What if we go 6-10
in the third year?
Yeah,
under Meyer.
Yeah,
then I'd be skeptical because that's 3 years. Then usually for me, whether it's an NFL player or an NFL coach, 3 years, you gotta determine if you're the guy or not.
No, look at Mike Norvell.
Norvell, this is not.
This is year 0.
Yeah, it's not even year 1.
Shout out to Scott on the Sports Bar Pod.
Yes. But what I'm thinking is. For example, all the quarterbacks, all the first-round players we've had, 3 years, you should know if they're good or not. Taven Bryan, massive bust.
Terrible.
I'm surprised we haven't cut him yet.
I hope we do tomorrow.
Blaine Gabbert, we knew he was garbage. Blake Bortles, the third year, he was trash. But
awesome.
We gave him the fourth year, and he took us to the AFC Championship, and great, we got to give him an extension now, and it bit us in the ass. So and coach, the same thing, Marone. We kind of knew he wasn't the great coach. He was okay coach at best. So that's why I think 3 years, honestly, we will know if this Urban Meyer hire was a success or not. We'll see. Maybe he wins 6 games his first year, then 8 games his next year, and 10 games his third year. Progression, you keep him because I still don't know the contract details of what Urban has
I don't think
it's
even been released.
Yeah, I haven't seen contract length or terms of the deal, so I don't know what's going on with that.
Okay. Here's one for you. No injuries. We have 3 wins. His face is telling a story, but he can't get the words out.
Yeah. I don't know what the issue is then. Who's the quarterback? Is it Trevor Lawrence?
It's Trevor Lawrence, yeah. And he's not injured. He's just, just kind of struggling.
So, okay, 3 wins are 13. Okay, since 14 losses we'll have because there's 17 games next year.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Are half the games one-score games? So there's just so many key factors.
Yeah, I know. But, sometimes, Mike, I'm just looking for a generalization here,
I mean, 3 wins, I'm concerned.
If you say 3 wins next year, I'm pissed.
I'm concerned.
I'm not coming into this season if we have Trevor Lawrence, we have Urban Meyer, we hire I hope, some good free agents and have a great draft class besides Trevor. If we win 3 games, I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah, I'm concerned if we win 3 games.
Especially with all the tickets people are buying.
I personally don't think that 3 wins is going to happen. We do play the Texans twice. That's 2 wins right there.
Is Deshaun the quarterback week 1?
He's not. He's done in Houston, I think. Unless they hire Eric Bieniemy, but we'll see about that.
New England?
I don't know if we play New England.
No, I mean, like, does he go to New England? Does he go to Miami? Does he go? Where does he go?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. But
Did you see there was a post on, I think it was his Instagram, of him wearing a jacket that had the Falcons logo on it?
Oh gosh. We'll have to ask JJ on how he feels, and BZ and Mike and Chance. I cannot remember Chance. My bad, Chance.
Chance and friends. And I know he's not listening, but he'd
Chance
get
isn't
that
listening?
reference. He'd get that reference if he was listening. JJ, if you're listening, happy belated birthday.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, okay. I was just curious, Mike. I wasn't trying to make you think too hard. I just wanted to hear some just quick thoughts on Meyer, our new head ball coach.
Well, I mean, now I used to hate him at UF. Now I'm like, okay, let's see what he's got. Now, hopefully, he doesn't ruin the team like he did UF and Ohio. Well, Ohio State were set in good hands.
There you go. Yeah, speak it into existence, Mike. Good job.
Hey,
you can all blame Mike if he doesn't. If Mike is right, you can beat him. Well, his Twitter at
ruining the team. The team's already been ruined the last decade. I don't know what else they could do.
Well, you just said if Urban ruins the team.
Okay, the team's already terrible enough.
How do you ruin the team? You let James Robinson go.
You know how you ruin the team? You take
draft
Kyle
somebody
Trask
else.
number one.
It's Kyle Trask.
Take Kyle Trask number one.
Exactly. Well, let's try and stay away from the negative stuff.
That's my name. I'm always negative on the show.
Negative Mike. It doesn't have a good ring to it, but we'll just call you. I was about to say something.
No, we're not doing that.
Not on the airwaves, just in my phone. Oh, man. But that's all we got. Again, thank you, Nate, for your interview with us. If you are listening, we greatly appreciate it. And anybody who's come along for the first time, if you've never interacted with us before, we are at Dimes on Duval on Instagram, Twitter. You can find us on Facebook as well. And Mike and myself, as well as our third member, Skylar, who's not with us today, are all on Twitter. I'm at Keith Manzi.
I'm at Mike_Yazgi904, and Yazgi is spelled Yazigi.
Just think Yazigi, but that's not how it actually is. And Skylar, our third member, is at SkyChase94. That's SkyChase94.
One last thing. This is the first episode of the new year. So Happy New Year to everyone. Hopefully we're the last to wish you a Happy New Year.
Yes, and also this marks 4 years of this, Mike. You and I. We recorded our first vlog on 1/19. Was that 2018 then? My
4 years
goodness,
ago?
4 years ago. Mike and I just kind of started this in my old
17 then would be
17, yeah. So we started this in my backyard, and we were just sitting on some picnic chairs, and we had a table. I think we threw a blanket on it to make it a little bit nicer, and we went on. I had my camera set up, and we sat in my backyard, and we recorded. It was bad, It really wasn't very good, and we just wanted to try it just to say that we did it. As Mike has now pulled it up, I'm wearing a delightful. Oh, it looks like I'm wearing Alabama colors right there. Yeah, we're just in my backyard with terrible lighting, but really, we really got our launch there. Oh man, we even had the helmets on the table. See, we tried, and God, I was probably like 20 pounds lighter too.
God, that's when I did a buzz cut. So if you really want to see the video, go to our YouTube page, Dimes on Duval, and just go ahead and watch some of those videos.
Yeah,
there are
some of those
pretty bad videos.
That was our Trust the Process days.
Yep.
Man. Trust the process. Good times. But yeah. So 4 years. Proud to be alongside you, Mike. I appreciate everything we've done together. We've come a long way from sitting in front of a fireplace, all baby-faced and whatnot. Goodness gracious, we were some kids. We really tried to edit those things, too, and they were so bad.
Well, that's why we're on podcast form, not
exactly.
video.
You don't have to see our ugly faces anymore unless you go on our social platforms and look at a picture. But for Mike Yazgi, I'm Keith Manzi. Thank you for listening to this episode of Dimes on Duval.